Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our official sponsor, Sun Life Organics. Love, heal, and inspire. Sun Life Organics is a juice bar that has locations all across the United States, providing only the highest quality organic ingredients. I love it. Personally, I go just about every day. My favorite smoothie is the Holy Cow. It's packed with 50 grams of protein, and it always helps me recover. Go find one near you. Another official sponsor of today's podcast is Noble Origins. Noble is a grass-fed beef protein complex, utilizing everything in the cow from nose to tail. It's personally my favorite protein. I like the vanilla the best. I like to mix it with raw milk. That is my favorite combination, but the chocolate is also amazing. I also had mentioned with additional sponsor, Sun Life Organics, that they have a shake smoothie called the Holy Cow. They also utilize Noble protein in order to hit that 50 grams in that shake. So again, go order it. Check them out, nobleorigins.com. Use code ADY for 15% off. Love y'all. Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. On today's episode, it's going to be a short one, but we're going to address some of the FAQs or frequently asked questions that come into the DMs regarding fitness. I think this is an important conversation. I think that there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of things that occur within that world and in that realm that should be shared and talked about. And I'm by no means an expert. The only thing that I understand about physical fitness is what I've put my body through to get where I'm at. And so I've learned through trial and error, and I've had some really good coaches along the way that have imprinted some pretty great stuff on my mind on how to build, how to get faster, how to get stronger, how to last longer in sport, like all these different things. So I'm going to shed a little bit of that light today. For those of you that know the story, my story at least, it's pretty simple, right? I was 312 pounds, and I made a decision once I started that process that I was going to lose weight and that I was going to do an Ironman. That was kind of the first thing that popped into my head. So like, I'm going to lose weight naturally by training for this race. I don't know how much, I don't know where I'll end up, but that's what's going to happen. And then I'm going to do this physical feat that at that point in time, for me, it was something I'd only read about, like people doing it or accomplishing it. It seemed like so far-fetched. But I needed that far-fetched of a goal in order to have something to pursue that would keep me on track. So Ironman was the first thing I think that kind of popped up for me of like, oh, this is extreme. You know, it's 140.6 miles of endurance. You know, for those of you that don't know, the Ironman breakdown is first you swim, it's 2.4 miles. Then you get on the bike for 112 miles, and then you run a full marathon distance. And so I think for me at 312 pounds, day one, can't even run a quarter mile, that goal seemed impossible, but it gave me this mark that I could hit if I stayed focused and did what I needed to do. That process for me, I genuinely speaking, like I don't remember it being that difficult. I don't remember the training being all that difficult. It seemed pretty well balanced, and I think it was because I had such a great coach. Shout out Natasha with MVDM, but it was kind of this approach of like, you're going to do, because it's three sports, it impacts the body in three different ways. So you're going to do, on most days, two of those sports, right? So like most days you're either swimming and running or biking and running, like a brick workout. And then sometimes you just have a long run or a long bike. But typically you're doing multiple sports in a day. The time commitment, I think, is the biggest piece to that. It's not necessarily the difficulty of finishing the race. Like once you're out there and you get started, as long as you can kind of keep your body moving and not cramp up, like you have a really good chance of finishing that race. The training for that race, I would say, is much more difficult than the race itself, just from a time commitment perspective. I mean, there's plenty, I have the utmost respect for people in the triathlon community because essentially most of their days start before 5 a.m. and most of their days end after 9 p.m. And that's with their full-time job. That's with their families. And that's probably between 2 and 3 hours a day dedicated specifically to training for that race. Some people train more, some people train less, but I would call that about the average from what I've seen. So anybody that you see in that world, ultimate respect, hats off to them. I think it is something that everyone should do once. I'm not quite sure why you would do a half Ironman. That doesn't really make sense to me, especially if you're doing it to get to a full Ironman distance. Like, I think you just go all in, do the full, get it over with, then decide if you want to do something faster or something like that and do a half. But For me, it was like, I want to hit the full Ironman mark, and then I'll transition into something else and I'll figure out what that is. So I can honestly say in reflection, that was the perfect place for me to start, because it helped me lose the weight. It helped me get into shape. It helped me understand my body, what that was going to be like from an endurance perspective. It helped me understand like what injuries I had pre-existing from playing football my whole life. Like I understood, oh yeah, like I do have knee problems in both knees, and I do have a shoulder issue, and this sucks when I'm swimming. This sucks when I'm biking. My feet hurt when I'm running because of X, Y, and Z. And so it gave me a full inventory of my body. And I think that was important for me. It helped me start to address some of these imbalances or issues that existed with all of the weight. And when I had all the weight on me, obviously any injury you have just gets compounded. It's just more force, especially when it's joint related, right? Like if you have knee problems and you weigh 100 pounds more, you're going to have worse knee problems. Typically that's just how it works. Like you don't have less issues with more weight. It's usually more issues with more weight. So losing the weight and then understanding what my body was actually capable of and how it felt, I think was important for me. And that was the first 14 months or so of that journey. It was all Ironman based. We did that race October 2021. So again, that would have been, 13 months, that process, 13 to 14 months. And after that race, I don't think it was more than a week, I sold the bike. I was like, okay, I'm good. Like I don't have anything else to cross off here. Because for me, it was never about getting competitive in that sport. It was part of the journey, right? It was part of this process of like, you can do anything you set your mind to, watch this. And that was just step one on the physical side. Once that was completed, I really, and I've learned this in reflection, I really tried to emulate Nick Bare in a lot of ways. Those of you that follow him, CEO, founder, Bare Performance Nutrition, based out of here in Central Texas, and a lot of great content, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, great media team, great company, like nothing bad to say about the guy at all. I think that he's actually one of the few that like they are who they say they are. Like they put out in the way that they promote on social media. That's who they are in real life. And so I have the utmost respect for him. And I have gratitude for him too, because I think I know the reason I did an Ironman is because I saw that on YouTube during the big freeze. And I was like, that guy can do one. I want to do one. Like he just said, like, you can do anything you set your mind to. Okay, this seems like it's part of the process. So I'm gratitude to him for that. And then I emulated him after the Ironman. I did some reflection after the Ironman. I was like, all right, what's harder than what we just did? Like I got to find something harder to keep me on track to continue to pursue this level of greatness I want to get to one day, right? I want that trajectory to remain just as difficult. And so when I reflected upon that race, I was like, okay, what was the hardest part about that? For me, it definitely wasn't the swim. That never had any difficulty there. I feel like I could float 2.4 miles. And I'm not saying that from a cocky, arrogant place. I just grew up around the water and I'm comfortable in it. So the swim wasn't going to be an issue. In training leading up to the Ironman, I swam a 10K, so 6.2 miles in a swimming pool one day in like 3.5 hours, just because somebody at the dog park had said that I wasn't a good swimmer. So I went and did that. So like it was never swimming. Point being, never swimming, not an issue. Biking, I just didn't enjoy it, to be honest with you. It wasn't my cup of tea. Like you're riding a pencil essentially for anywhere from 5 to 7 hours, depending on the course. Sometimes less. Some of the really fast guys obviously go sub 5. But I think that was, for me, I was like, I don't enjoy that. It really didn't seem that difficult. And it's probably because I didn't push to a certain level. On the bike, I kind of just wanted to get through the bike because I knew if I could get on the run during the Ironman, I'd finish. I wouldn't quit. So the bike for me was kind of just like, it was pretty casual, if I'm being honest. I think my like average wattage for that entire thing was like 160, which is, or maybe it was like 150, honestly. It was pretty low. It was like an aerobic, like I was kind of just chilling the whole time. And so it wasn't going to be the bike. Like I never had this dream of like, okay, I'll bike across America. That'll be difficult. Like to me, that just sounded ignorant. So I sold the bike. And then when I got down and like in the nitty gritty with it, I looked at the run and I'm like, okay, this is hands down the hardest part for me. Everybody has different challenges, but for me, the running was the hardest part. Like I never ran a marathon. My first marathon distance was in the full Ironman. And I think in training, the longest run we did was 18 miles. And that seemed like pure insanity to me. Like I couldn't believe that even happened. So going into the Ironman and finishing the marathon, I was like, okay, that was really hard. Like there was multiple times throughout the course of that I wanted to stop. I never thought about quitting during the swim. I never thought about quitting during the bike. But during the run, there were multiple times, if I'm being completely honest, where I'm like, this sucks. Like it wasn't really about quitting. It was more like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so for me, what that represented was there's more to learn from this. Like there's a deeper cave that you need to tap into. And so as timing would have it, Nick Bear at that point in time was training, I believe, for Rocky Raccoon 100. He'd done Leadville, or he was either building up for Leadville and then he did Leadville first, then Rocky. Either way, I'm like, okay, I'll do a 100-miler. Like I'm going to do a 100-mile ultra marathon, like a foot race, and that'll be the next thing that keeps me on track and building towards the right place physically. Undershot the difficulty of that distance and that race for me. I totally undershot it, and I don't think I appreciated it quite enough, how difficult it was going to be to get that done. So the first year training for that, we got pretty deep, and I've talked a little bit about this. There's an entire episode on like the Rocky Raccoon experience, but you know, the first year I made it just over 60 miles, right at the 100K mark, and quit. It doesn't even matter why. I just quit. Doesn't matter at all. Year 2, made it to over the 100K mark and then quit again. And so at this point I reflected, I'm like, all right, I've done this for 2 years. Like I'm running anywhere at that time. It was probably 30 to 50 miles a week. And then I'd peak at like maybe 70 a week. I think I had one peak week the second year at 100 miles. And that was it. Like the volume, truth be told, like in reflection for me, the volume wasn't there. I wasn't putting in enough work. I felt committed. I felt like I was doing the right thing. I felt like I was putting my shoes on every day, but the commitment was actually a lot deeper than I imagined. Year 3 of that journey, I'd started working with my good friend and endurance coach, Matthew Johnson. A lot of you know who that is. He's actually in a build right now to run across Texas for the second time. And I'd went to him right before the second attempt and said, hey, I need your help. And then the entire year leading up to the third attempt, he did all my programming. He was my coach. And that year I learned more about myself, I think, than truth be told, like through and through, I learned more about myself in that 365 days than I think I've ever learned in that same amount of time in my life. So many things happened personally, professionally, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It was insane. So I knew I was on the right path just because of everything that was shifting and changing and all the things that I was learning. But the time commitment again in that was, it was ridiculous. You're waking up and you know every day when you wake up you're running 10 to 12 miles, period. And you might get a day off every 4 weeks, right? That's just how we built out the programming. So it literally beats your body to death. Hormonally, it's destructive, right? Not for everyone, but that was my experience. Like my hormones were shot. Your T is crazy low. Your cortisol is crazy high. White blood cells are impacted. Red blood cells are impacted. Everything is impacted. And so I felt like throughout the course of that year, I was becoming like mentally tougher, emotionally tougher, but physically I felt weaker and weaker and weaker. And it was just like, okay, all I can do is distance run now. Like that was the only thing that I was capable of doing. I could run the shit out of 10 miles over and over and over again. But like, obviously in the weight room, those numbers took a hit. My strength, my clarity, my focus, my drive, all those things took a hit because I was so focused on just, doing this 100-mile distance. And in reflection, I'm glad that we went through that year together, me and Matthew. I wouldn't change that for the world. And we were able to do 2 100-mile races in an 8-week period. And I can hang my hat on that. I don't need to go back and do that distance again to recertify. And I've said it publicly, like the only time I will ever put my body through that again, there's really only 3 races. It's Badwater 135, Leadville, the Leadville 100, and if they do like an ultra in Antarctica, I think I would do that. But outside of those experiences, I have no interest in doing any of them again. If you need to Google it for validation or for verification, it was the 2024 Brazos Bend 100 miler and the 2025 Rocky Raccoon 100 miler. If you want to see the previous years, it'd obviously be 2024 and 2023 at Rocky Raccoon 100, where you can see the DNF on both of those. And so that 3 years, though, the point being, like, I learned so much about myself. Like, I learned what all in really meant, like what being committed really meant, and like what it meant to have boundaries and say no to things. And today's episode is brought to you by our official sponsor, Sun Life Organics. Love, heal, and inspire. Sun Life Organics is a juice bar that has locations all across the United States, providing only the highest quality organic ingredients. I love it. Personally, I go just about every day. My favorite smoothie is the Holy Cow. It's packed with 50 grams of protein, and it always helps me recover. Go find one near you. Another official sponsor of today's podcast is Noble Origins. Noble is a grass-fed beef protein complex, utilizing everything in the cow from nose to tail. It's personally my favorite protein. I like the vanilla the best. I like to mix it with raw milk. That is my favorite combination, but the chocolate is also amazing. I also had mentioned with additional sponsor, Sun Life Organics, that they have a shake smoothie called the Holy Cow. They also utilize Noble protein in order to hit that 50 grams in that shake. So again, go order it. Check them out, nobleorigins.com. Use code ADY for 15% off. Love y'all. What impacts you if you don't do that? And so I think that once I got through that second 100-miler and I literally came back again, it was like this moment of like, all right, my shoes are going in the trash. Like, I threw away 10 pair of running shoes. I never wanted to see them again. And I took a little bit of a break. And during that break, got some things in my personal life squared away and realized, like, damn, I really miss just lifting weights. I miss feeling strong. I miss being functional, right? I miss being like capable and useful. I missed all of that. And I felt like I'd lost a piece of that with all the endurance training. And so I transitioned again. I found someone who was better than me at that. And I connected with them. Shout out to Austin. And his name is Austin, not the city Austin. Shout out to Austin Clayton. But got connected with him and just asked him for help. And he more or less gave me the roadmap. He's like, here's exactly what you need to do and here's how to do it. And we've been on that journey now for officially about 5 months. And the changes that have occurred in my body and my health are insane. It's completely different in so many ways. But what I'll say is this, like, people ask me, like, what's the most difficult thing physically? For me, it's always been running. Like, if you want to do something really, really hard and you want to test your mettle, like mentally and emotionally and spiritually, I would say sign up for the 100-mile distance and put a year or 2 years into that training and then go do it. I think it'll shift and change your life in ways you could only, you can't even imagine. So I would say if you're pursuing that level of difficulty and growth, I think that's the distance to go. Or, you can get into an Ironman. It's the same thing. It also creates massive change in your life. To me, lifting weights for an hour a day and eating right is by far the easiest thing that I've done in the last 5 years. And I don't mean that in a cocky way. I'm just saying, like, the time commitment is much less for the results that you get, right? Like, when you're training for an ultra, you're running 2 to 3 hours a day. So you're literally destroying your body. Like, you're destroying your legs, you're destroying your joints. You feel like shit all the time. I mentioned the hormonal stuff. Like, it sucks. Lifting weights, like, yeah, you get sore and yeah, things hurt, but you're not back to back to back to back to back heavy legs or back to back to back to back press or back to back to back pull. Like, it's all broken up into days, and you have like a cycle that you're on essentially that's like, 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, or 4 on, 1 off, 3 on, whatever it is. And so that to me is much easier. It's an hour time commitment a day. And I think that's why, unfortunately, I've lost a lot of grace. And I think I've gotten kind of quiet about it, especially on social media. And you guys are probably laughing because you're like, well, you post your workouts every day. I do, because people ask all the time, how am I getting in such good shape? I just show you. I'm like, here. If you, like, it's like anything else in life. Repetition creates success. So as long as that repetition is in a growth trajectory, right? Repetition in a bad way doesn't create success. It creates failure. But if it's in a good trajectory, it's going to create success. So, like, people say, like, how are you so good at pull-ups? Well, like, if you go on my story, I do pull-ups every morning. Like, I'm going to go do my pull-ups. I might even have to get them in at night sometimes, but daily I'm going to hit my pull-ups. It's how you get better at them. Like, when I first started doing pull-ups after that ultra, I might have done 3 or 4, like legit. Like, that was where my strength levels were at. 2 days ago, I cranked out 30. So, like, and the only way that that's happened, it's nothing special I've done. I just show up and do them every day. And so, like, if you see me posting that stuff on social media, it's just like, here, like, I'm trying to lead by example. This is what you have to do. You want to get better at this thing, you do this thing. Same thing with lifting weights, or same thing with nutrition. Like, it takes consistent, like, incrementally over time, consistent, proper decision making in order to reach a goal. Like, you can't be, that's why balance is kind of bullshit, because I think people overdo it. They're like, well, I'm 50-50. Well, like, for me, that doesn't make sense. That means I'm only 50%. If I'm perfect, I'm only 50% of what I'm capable of. That doesn't sit well with me. So maybe it sits well with others, and that's fine. But balance to me is kind of a joke. It's like, when I'm in the weight room, I'm focused on lifting weights. When I'm eating, I'm focused on what I'm eating and when I'm eating. When I'm writing the book, I'm focused on writing the book. When I'm in the podcast, recording the studio, that's what I'm focused on. When I'm on a construction site, that's what I'm focused on. I think that's my type of balance, right? I don't think you should balance things within each other, though. It's the same thing, like, or in a partnership. Like, if I was married and I was with my partner, like, that time is about that relationship, right? It's not about all the other things happening in my life. And I think for me, that's just worked, to try to find these blocks where, like, whatever I'm doing, that's what I'm all in on. And for me, that is balance. So it looks a little different for everybody, but the point being, like, and I hate to say it this way, but getting in shape is simple. Like, it is crazy simple. It's just not easy. It requires commitment. It requires making the right decisions. It requires showing up for yourself. It requires showing up for yourself on days you don't want to. Like, that's the requirement. And that's why I think it's okay to appreciate someone from a physical standpoint, male or female, right? Like, oh, that person definitely takes care of themselves. That person definitely works on themselves, right? You can tell just by looking at someone. Now, of course, there are some genetic anomalies that, like, I know of them, and there's people that I've been close to in my life that they really don't do shit. They just look good. Good for them. That's not the case for me, and probably for a lot of people. So if you see, like I said, most people and they look good, it's because they've put in a lot of work, especially the older you get. It's easy to look good in your 20s. It's easy to look good like early 30s even if you're barely taking care of yourself. But once you hit a certain mark, like, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. So I think that there's an appreciation level there. But I will say, physically, like, this period of my life is the easiest period that I've had in the last 5 years. Like, it is easy for me to eat the right thing, and it is easy for me to lift weights for 1 hour a day, and it is easy for me to do my pull-ups in the morning when I get up. It's not a big time commitment. Like, if you really break it down, I promise you the majority of you probably spend more than an hour a day scrolling on Instagram. So you can trade those things, give the hour to your body and give 5 minutes to Instagram. Your life's going to get better, is my point. If you flip that, your life's going to get worse. So I would say, again, it depends on what you're pursuing as far as physical fitness goes. If you're pursuing mental, emotional growth, I think endurance is hands down the most difficult thing you can do. Endurance sports, like, it may be like a bodybuilding show, right? Because that requires a ton of discipline. But to be in average shape and look decent, I don't think it's a big commitment at all. Like I said, it's less than an hour a day probably if you really look at it. Whereas, like, these endurance sports, they're going to push you in every realm of your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and the time commitment is much larger. So I think anyone, like, when I meet people and they're like, oh, I've done an Ironman, or, oh, I've done a 100-miler, I almost know immediately that they're a fairly committed person. Like, that's probably someone that'd be good to work with, or connect with from a professional standpoint, or even a romantic or personal standpoint. Like, I understand your grit if you've completed one of those things. But if you just work out twice a week or twice a month, like, I don't know your grit. So, like, it's going to take a different type of exposure in order for me to understand who you are and who your character is. So again, I think that those things are important. I think everyone should do an Ironman at least once in their life. And I think everyone should run a marathon in their life. You don't have to do a 100-mile ultra marathon. You can just do a marathon. You can do a half marathon or 10K. Find what seems impossible to you and just go pursue that thing physically, like whatever it is. Whatever you think you can't do, go pursue that thing with everything that you have. And, 9 times out of 10, you'll hit your mark if you stay committed long enough and you don't quit. So I say all that to say, I don't think as a society we are taking our physical fitness and our health serious enough. I think that, if you really boil it down to what the greatest issues are in our society outside of the obvious political shit, it's health, right? It's people's health. It's heart disease, cardiovascular disease, cancer, all these different types of things. And like the contributing factors to that is what you eat and what you do with your body and what you drink. Let's not get it twisted. So I think that that's so important for us to take a step back and take a look at. I saw like politically they're bringing back the presidential fitness. I can't think of the presidential fitness like system, if you will, for elementary schools and middle schools. I remember that as a kid, and I think that's great. Like as a kid, you should be moving your body. You don't have to play sports, you don't have to do all that, but like you should be moving your body. You should be taught that like this is what it feels like to release endorphins or create dopamine on your own. I think when we teach children the only way to achieve that's through a tablet or an iPad, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, right? We're not teaching them what they really need to know. So I love that they're bringing that back, regardless of my political alliances. Like I think that that's a good move. And I think along those lines, we should celebrate people that are pursuing greatness within their physical self. And I say this all the time, and I've read it on a million memes. I certainly didn't create it. But, the external body is a representation of internal commitments. And I really believe that. Like what someone looks like most of the time is an example of how committed they are to themselves internally. And I can appreciate that and I can respect that. So I think there's an acknowledgement. We need to do a better job of like, you see it in the gym a lot, which is cool. But like guys will walk up to guys and be like, dude, you look great, man. You're crushing it. Like, I think that's okay. I think we should be doing more of that. And it could be like, it can be male to female, female to male, female to female, whatever. But I can tell you from a male's perspective, there's nothing quite like another dude who's in shape walking up to you being like, hey man, I respect your grind. You look good. That's a really good feeling. You have to earn that. And again, I think it's another one of those things in life. Like it's not handed to you. You have to go earn that. You have to show up for it. Like you can buy nice cars. You can buy a Rolex. You can buy, property, you can buy a lot of shit, but it's real hard to buy a good body for a man, right? Like you got to work for it. And so I think that there's a certain level of respect that comes with it. And I think I'll pursue kind of this type of physical fitness for the foreseeable future. I have no interest, like I said, right now I'm climbing back into endurance sports. I don't really like what it did to my body. And I really don't like what it did to my mind at the end of the day. Like it carved out and uncovered a lot of things I needed to work on. But once I got through that, it's like, okay, I don't really need to go back there. If I get into a place, so I can promise you this, where I'm deeply struggling mentally or emotionally, the first thing I will turn to is I will jump back into endurance training, because that uncovers all, it exposes all. There's no ego in that shit. It literally will break you off every single time. And so again, I have the utmost respect for that community as well. I hope that makes sense as far as a physical fitness standpoint and where I'm at, and not just where I'm at, but like kind of the journey of it. If you have questions, obviously you can reach out. You can DM me on ADYATX. Don't ask me how I got in shape. Just watch my story. Like, I'm serious. Like I didn't ask Nick Bear how to do what Nick Bear was doing. I just paid attention to his content and was like, well, he's doing this at 5 a.m. It looks like I need to be doing that at 5 a.m. Oh, he does this at 3. He eats this. He's doing, like, that's it. Like, there's so much content out there. You can literally watch something and pick up on it. Don't be so lazy just to ask someone how they did it if they're showing you how they did it day in and day out. If you really care about yourself, invest the time and watch and learn. And like I said, shout out to those creators who gave me that. There's I've been pretty rough on Austin lately as far as the men in this community, and something I do want to say is there are some dogs in this community, like, for sure. And I know I've focused kind of on the other end of like men that aren't necessarily cutting they're not necessarily up to snuff here in this community, but there are a lot of men that are, and not a lot, but quite a few. And I think that I owe them, their due credit. Matt Johnson is one of them. Like, that dude runs 100 miles before it's Friday. Like, he'll run 100 miles Monday through Thursday, and then, still be able to build his brand, his business, be a good friend. That dude drove out to Leander before I could make it during the floods to go help a lady. Like, dude's a savage through and through. Like, it's undeniable. Same as Nick Bear. He does it at a high level, and he's been doing it at a high level. It's impressive. Jacob Donahue, he's been on here before, but like, he's a dog. The way he pushes himself and his commitments to himself are, they're rare. You don't see that much. And so I appreciate all of them. I think they give me like a North Star to look at and something to pursue in some way to improve myself. But that being said, like, the competition is never about me and them. It's always me versus me, and it should be you versus you. Like, you should just be actively striving to be better than you were yesterday. Again, you don't have to do a marathon to do that, an ultra marathon, an Ironman, or lift weights. Whatever that looks like for you, just move your body and get better than you were yesterday, and I think it'll pay massive dividends. So, again, I hope that makes sense. I love you guys. I appreciate your time today. That's going to wrap for today's episode of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.